So here to introduce us to the topic 4 of level 2, which is sensitivity and survival, is Rob, who you would have met in the topic temperature, talking about sharks. He's going to be joined by Hannah, and I'll let Rob introduce the topic to you here on the beach at the Marine Studies Centre. Hi Rob.
Hey Steve, welcome back everyone. So previously you guys have mostly been learning about physical aspects of the marine world and how they might be changing or fluctuating as time and space changes. Now within that time and space, of course, there are animals and creatures that have to live with and deal with how those factors are all changing around in their environment. So for example, on this beach here, we have cool water in the ocean. Up on the beach, you might have tide pools that have been sitting in the sun for a long time. Of course, sitting in the sun for a long time, the temperature in that tide pool is going to rise. The water is going to evaporate out of that tide pool, and so the salinity is going to be changing as well. Any creatures that decide to get stuck in that tide pool then need to deal with these changes as they're going along. Now, temperature is definitely one of the most important physical factors that these animals need to deal with, as they're all cold-blooded or ectotherms. Well, most of them, majority of them are anyway. And of course, the other big thing for them is salinity, which hopefully you've learnt a little bit in the previous sessions about how that might be impacting some of the things that live in these kinds of environments. So we know that in areas like the harbour here, some of those factors like temperature or salinity are changing through both time and space. One very important thing for the creatures that live in these areas then, of course, is to be able to sense these changes, to know that if they are going to survive, they need to stay in their ideal environment, and so they need to be able to move as these things are fluctuating as well. What we're going to do now is head up into the lab, show you guys some small exercises you can do yourself to test your senses, and then try and relate that to how these animals might be surviving in the marine world. So here we are in our wet lab, and we are going to set up a few very simple experiments over here, things that you can do at home yourselves, that you can try and test out some of your senses and figure out if you can live in the near shore just like some of those animals can as well. So the first one we have here, we've got 5 different bowls. You can use whatever you want, bowls, cups, anything that holds a bit of water, and we've got different levels of salt mixed into each of them. So if you want to do this yourself, maybe get a family member or someone else to surprise you by adding known quantities of salt to the different bowls or cups, and then you have to try and figure out which one is which. And I wonder if you can figure out what kind of sense you would use to figure out what or how much salt is in these bowls. Give you a clue, I suppose. Yeah, that one is very salty. I don't know who set that up, but wow, nice. So I know that one's very salty. So I'm going to go through and I'm going to... salty, but not too bad. Salty, but even less. Ooh. Right. So I can definitely tell you that this one here is the saltiest. This one's probably the second saltiest. These need to swap around. And that one down there is probably the most fresh by the way that I taste it anyway. When we're tasting all these salts and things, the particular senses we're using is a chemosensory sense. So picking up that salt on our taste buds, even certain chemicals and things we'll be able to smell on our noses as well. Now me working with sharks particularly, this here is a spiny dogfish shark, so they're a pretty common species around Otago. They have to know how these things change in the environment as well, and so we can actually have a look at them and find their chemosensory organs. So firstly they've got a couple nostrils underneath here, and you can see each nostril actually has 2 holes, and that lets water flow through it continuously. One hole goes in and one hole goes out. And then if I open the mouth, you can see in the bottom there as well, they've actually got a little tongue. And so just like us, they can use these chemosensory organs to pick up what's going on in their environment. Other than salinity, the other main factor we looked at in the ocean environment in terms of the things changing out there was temperature. And so we've got another nice, very simple experiment you can do at home. Again, different bowls or different cups with different temperatures in them. And of course, we have to use our own senses once again to try and figure out how we would order these different bowls. To set up your experiment for temperature, again, it's great to get someone else in the family to do this, so you will be surprised by what the results are going to be. But basically, get someone to fill a bowl with hot water from the tap. and place the bowl in the fridge to cool down. Let's take these back to our experiment. Ideally, you won't know which temperatures are which in these bowls, and you'll have to use your senses, one of our fundamental senses, touch, to try and figure out which bowl is hot, which bowl is cold, and what order they should go in. Now, we as animals, we're what's called warm-blooded or endothermic, right? And so our bodies create and maintain a set temperature inside it. A lot of the creatures out there are ectothermic or cold-blooded. And that means it's much more important for them to find an environment that's stable in the temperature range that suits them, because it's the environment that's controlling how warm their bodies are. But actually sensing temperature is the same for ourselves and other animals as well. And it's that sense of touch, nerves underneath the skin, that let us know if we're warm or cold. If you've ever gone for a swim out in the ocean yourselves and dunked your heads under, you've probably noticed that the ocean's actually a pretty noisy place. And sound, because water is so thick, actually travels really well through water. It actually travels about 5 times faster and 5 times further than what it does in air. So under the water, there is a plethora of different sounds. Now, when you think about it, a sound is just a wave of pressure moving through a medium. So what we hear in our ears is just pressure waves moving through the air. And the same thing happens underwater. Animals in these environments have evolved to be able to receive these sounds using different senses, to be able to figure out what's going on around them. So fish larvae, for instance, use the sound of waves breaking on a beach to be able to home in on a safe location to go during the night times. Sharks and things like that use vibrations in the water to track down their prey. Whales and dolphins can even communicate to each other using sounds under the water. So sound and being able to sense those sounds is very important in the environment. So when we were talking about salinity before, we called it a chemosensory input that we need to be able to sense. This is more of a mechanical sensory input that we need mechanical adaptations for picking up. So our ears are quite complex little things. We've got an eardrum, which is basically a little flat bit that can pick up the pressure waves as they're being pushed through, which then translates to 3 little ear bones on the inside of our ears. Sharks have also got ears on the sides of their head, which works very similar to that, but they've also got this really neat thing called a lateral line, and lateral lines are actually found on fish and things as well. And this lateral line is basically like having an ear all the way down your body. So on the inside here, there's a very small pit, and in the middle of that pit is a little hair. Anytime a pressure wave comes along and moves that hair, it then triggers nerves, letting the shark know that pressure waves have hit it in a certain direction. So it's a 360-degree sense that they can use. One little experiment you can do at home very easily is find some kind of container that you can't see through. So you can use anything like a margarine container that's empty, or even old yogurt containers. You just tape it closed once you've put something inside it. And we need you to fill those things with different substrates or things around in the kitchen. So you can use flour or sugar, sunflower seeds or any kind of seeds, nuts you might have, maybe some gravel. Water would be a good idea to have in there as well. Fill these little jars up and then have a listen to them when you've mixed them up enough so you don't know what's what. We've got some little ones we filled up here in old camera canisters, and so I can give that a shake. And just using my hearing, I can discern quite a bit about what's going on inside that container, even though I've got no idea what it is. One of the most important senses that we as humans have evolved is the ability to sense and detect light using our eyes. Now, this whole day I've been showing you things, pointing things out to you, and you've been watching this on a video. And that's all thanks to the fact that we've developed a way of discerning, 1, the intensity of light, and 2, what kind of wavelength that light is traveling at, and those wavelengths equal colors. Vision isn't just really important to us, but it's actually important to a lot of organisms that live in the ocean as well. It's actually been shown to have evolved probably over 40 times in different species in different ways. So some eyes are very simple and can just detect light or dark, and some eyes are far more complex, closer to ours. Sharks are a great example of eyes that are a little bit more complex, and they've been specialized to work in very turbid and sometimes even very dark conditions. So sharks' eyes can look a little bit different to ours. You can see they've got a slightly narrower slit for light to penetrate into, and they've also got a silver lining on the back of their eye that reflects light out backwards a second time, maximizing the efficiency of using that light. Our eyes will just receive light the first time. We tend to get wrapped up in our own senses, and we tend to characterize the whole world just knowing what we ourselves sense. But animals out there in the wild, of course, have got a whole bunch of senses that we don't have, or senses that are far more enhanced than ours. A really good example is the mantis shrimp. They can see in 12 different color wavelengths, where we as humans can only see in 3. We also have brand new senses that we don't have at all. Sharks have got what's called an electroreception sense, and it's located here in the front of the nose, and it uses these organs called ampullae of Lorenzini. So these small black dots you can see on the nose are all filled with a jelly which can sense electric and magnetic waves. Now every time something moves a muscle, small electric waves, small bioelectric fields are produced around that muscle. And so sharks can use this to home in on their prey. As a secondary thing, they can also use it to help their migrations by sensing the Earth's magnetic fields and which directions they should travel along. This is actually kind of similar to something that we see in seabirds that Hannah knows a lot more about than I do. So we're going to have a chat to Hannah about that instead.
So as Rob just mentioned, when it comes to senses of seabirds, they use magnetic fields, and it's particular magnetic fields that you can find around the Earth's surface. So the Earth has, as you guys probably know already, has a geographical north and south, but there's actually also a magnetic north and south of the Earth as well, which is a bit shifted from what the north and south that you would know. And with that, you actually have magnetic currents going where south is attracted to the North Pole. So around the Earth's surface, the birds can sense magnetic fields that goes from south to north. And they use those fields to navigate in their migration. So a good example of some birds that you find here in New Zealand that has a vast, really, really big migration pattern is sooty shearwater, or the TT. And what they do is that they actually have 2 different migration routes depending on where you normally find the birds. So some from here from the South Island, they'll go over here to South America, travel along the coast for a while, and then go up to North America and travel down again. While you find other populations or subpopulations of the TT around New Zealand that can go over again to South America, go along the coast, and then cross over to Japan before they go down. Now, this means that in order to actually preserve this species and keep it as a New Zealand returning species as well, you are not only just looking into the conservation here in New Zealand, but you actually have to look at conserving and preserving the habitats around the world in South America, North America, and Japan as well. Because if you lose just one spot, for example, the one up here, well then you can lose the survival of the species in all.